Before we begin today's story, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who loves music history, and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the lives behind the legends. Your support helps keep these stories alive. For more than 40 years, Ricky Nelson lived under the constant glow of American fame, a light that rarely dimmed and never truly let him step out of view. He was not just a singer or an actor, but a symbol of an era when television, music, and family entertainment blended into a single shared experience. To millions, Ricky felt familiar, almost personal, as if he were someone they grew up with rather than a distant celebrity. Yet the night his life ended, there was no spotlight, no cheering crowd, and no glamour. Instead, there was darkness, smoke, fear, and confusion in the Texas sky. When reports surfaced of a burning DC-3 aircraft falling toward farmland, disbelief spread just as quickly as the news itself. Fans refused to accept that the boy they watched grow up on television could be gone so suddenly. Investigators, meanwhile, faced a mystery that would soon become tangled in rumors, contradictions, and painful questions. Today, we revisit Ricky Nelson's life, his final hours, and the unresolved doubts that still surround his last flight. Ricky Nelson did not chase fame in the way many performers do. Stardom was woven into his life long before he understood what it meant. Born Eric Hilliard Nelson on May 8, 1940, in Teaneck, New Jersey, Ricky entered a world where performing was as normal as breathing. His parents, Ozzie and Harriet Nelson, were already household names, deeply rooted in radio and entertainment. Their home was less a private refuge and more a revolving door of scripts, rehearsals, and creative energy. In 1944, when the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet began as a radio sitcom, no one imagined how deeply it would shape Ricky's destiny. At first, actors played the Nelson children, but by 1949, the real David and Ricky stepped into those roles. Overnight, their voices became familiar to millions of listeners. When the show moved to television in 1952, Ricky was just 12 years old, and America watched him grow up week after week. His adolescence unfolded in front of cameras, blurring the line between real life and performance in a way few children could ever understand or escape. As the television show gained popularity, Ozzie Nelson carefully crafted Ricky's public image. He was presented as polite, clean-cut, and soft-spoken, the embodiment of the ideal American teenager. Viewers saw him as trustworthy, approachable, and safe, a young man parents approved of and teenagers admired. Yet behind that image was a boy who had little control over how the world perceived him. Fame arrived early, and with it came expectations that were impossible to shed. For 14 years, Ricky lived under the same character arc, even as his real personality evolved. While millions believed they knew him, few understood the pressure of never being allowed to change. Still, no one could have predicted that this television teenager would soon help transform American music. The shift came quietly at first, sparked not by ambition, but by something far more ordinary: a teenage crush. In that simple moment, Ricky's life took a turn that would carry him beyond scripted television and into the heart of rock and roll history, forever altering how young artists could cross from screen to stage. In 1957, Ricky's girlfriend, Diana Osborne, expressed her admiration for Elvis Presley, a name that was quickly becoming synonymous with rebellion and youthful energy. Ricky, calm and confident, suggested he could sing too. What began as a casual challenge soon became a defining moment. Within weeks, he recorded a cover of Fats Domino's "I'm Walkin'" and performed it on his family's television show. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Record stores were flooded with teenagers eager to buy the single, and Ricky Nelson was suddenly not just a television star, but a recording artist with real credibility. Hits followed one after another: "A Teenager's Romance," "You're My One and Only Love," and then "Poor Little Fool." In 1958, that song made history by becoming the very first #1 track on the newly created Billboard Hot 100. Ricky had crossed a line no one else had before. He proved that television fame could translate directly into musical success, changing the industry forever. Yet even as his star rose higher, Ricky began to feel the weight of being trapped in a version of himself the public refused to let go. By the early 1960s, Ricky Nelson was a cultural force. With more than 30 top 40 hits, he stood alongside icons like Elvis Presley, shaping the sound of a generation. Teenagers adored him, parents trusted him, and networks relied on his image to represent wholesome America. But inside, Ricky struggled with a quiet conflict. He wanted to grow, to explore deeper musical ideas, and to be taken seriously as an artist rather than a manufactured idol. The image that had made him famous now felt like a cage. As music evolved and audiences changed, Ricky sensed that his time as a teenage heartthrob was slipping away. Unlike others who tried desperately to cling to fading trends, Ricky felt pulled toward something more authentic. This internal tension would soon collide with a rapidly changing music landscape. The British invasion arrived, bringing with it new sounds, new faces, and a dramatic shift in what audiences wanted. Almost overnight, the clean-cut American style that had defined Ricky's success was seen as outdated. What followed would test his resilience in ways fame never had before. The mid-1960s marked a painful turning point. As bands like the Beatles dominated the charts, Ricky watched his commercial success decline. Yet instead of copying what was popular, he chose a braver, riskier path. He reinvented himself. Moving toward country rock, Ricky embraced a sound rooted in American tradition, blending rockabilly nostalgia with country storytelling. Artistically, it was one of his strongest periods. Personally, it was devastating. Audiences who once adored him refused to follow this evolution. They wanted the boy they remembered, not the man he had become. The rejection reached its peak during a 1971 concert at Madison Square Garden, where fans openly booed him for performing new material. The humiliation cut deeply, but it also sparked creativity. From that moment came Garden Party, a song that reflected Ricky's frustration and quiet dignity. Released in 1972, it became a major hit, proving he still had a voice worth hearing. Yet even that success could not shield him from the struggles growing in his personal life. Ricky married Kristen Harmon in 1963, hopeful that family life would offer stability away from public scrutiny. Together, they had 4 children, and for a time, it seemed like Ricky had found balance. But fame, financial stress, and unresolved personal struggles slowly eroded their relationship. Kristen battled alcoholism, and their arguments became public knowledge, feeding tabloids eager for scandal. By 1977, the marriage collapsed entirely. The divorce was bitter and prolonged, filled with legal disputes over money, custody, and property. Years of court battles drained Ricky emotionally and financially. When the divorce was finalized in 1982, he had lost more than $1 million in legal and accounting fees. The financial strain forced him into relentless touring. Performing was no longer just passion, it was survival. Night after night, Ricky traveled from city to city, determined to provide for his children and maintain his independence. Tragically, that constant motion would place him in the very situation that ended his life. In 1985, hoping to reduce travel costs and regain control over his schedule, Ricky purchased a 1944 Douglas DC-3 aircraft. The plane carried history, nostalgia, and risk. Once a military transport during World War II, it had passed through several owners, including the DuPont family and Jerry Lee Lewis. While iconic, the aircraft was old and increasingly unreliable. Almost immediately, mechanical problems surfaced. Engines failed. Repairs piled up. On one occasion, the plane had to be physically pushed off the runway. In September 1985, a magneto malfunction grounded the aircraft, forcing Ricky to miss a major concert. Despite warnings and repeated issues, the DC-3 remained in use. Ricky needed it. Touring was his income, and income meant survival. By December, he and the Stone Canyon Band were performing across the South, closing out the year with back-to-back shows. The final destination was Dallas, where a New Year's Eve concert awaited. None of them knew this journey would be their last. On December 31, 1985, Ricky boarded the DC-3 alongside his fiancée, Helen Blair, the 2 pilots and 5 band members. Helen, though younger and controversial in the eyes of his parents, had become a steady presence in his life. At approximately 1:00 p.m., the plane lifted off from Guntersville, Alabama, heading toward Dallas. For hours, the flight seemed routine. Then, at 5:08 p.m., pilot Brad Rank contacted air traffic control. His voice was calm but uneasy. He mentioned a little problem and requested to turn back toward Texarkana. That phrase would later echo through investigations and media coverage. 3 minutes later, the tone changed completely. Panic filled the cockpit as smoke rapidly overtook the aircraft. Air traffic controllers scrambled to help, but the situation was spiraling out of control. Below, witnesses watched in horror as the plane descended, trailing thick black smoke across the Texas sky. Accounts from that final descent are haunting. Farmers and residents saw the DC-3 flying dangerously low, wobbling as if fighting against an invisible force. Some heard engines sputtering. Others described the sky darkening with smoke. Inside the cabin, chaos unfolded. Investigators later determined the smoke originated near a gasoline-powered heater in the rear of the plane, a component already known to malfunction. Conflicting pilot testimonies only deepened the mystery. One claimed to have checked on passengers. The other said the heater had been acting up throughout the day. At 5:14 p.m., radar contact was lost. The plane clipped power lines, struck a telephone pole, and crashed into a pasture near DeKalb, Texas. Flames erupted instantly. The pilots escaped through cockpit windows, badly burned but alive. For Ricky Nelson, Helen Blair, and the 5 band members, there was no escape. They died from smoke inhalation and burns before impact. In the days that followed, grief turned ugly. Before investigators could finish their work, tabloids published shocking claims that drugs caused the fire. The rumor suggested cocaine use on board, a story that spread rapidly despite lacking evidence. Ricky's children were devastated. They publicly defended their father, insisting he had never used cocaine. The allegations felt like a second tragedy layered on top of the first. The National Transportation Safety Board launched an extensive investigation lasting 18 months. Every piece of debris, every maintenance record, and every witness statement was examined. In the end, the drug rumors were completely dismissed. No evidence supported them. The fire was traced back to the heater system. Still, questions remained. Why was the plane allowed to fly? Why were emergency procedures not followed? Why did pilot actions potentially worsen the situation? The official report offered conclusions, but not closure. For Ricky Nelson's family, the battle did not end with the report. They continued to speak out, determined to protect his legacy. They emphasized that Ricky died working, doing what he loved, not living recklessly as rumors suggested. Locals in DeKalb shared memories of the crash, the flames, and the shock that followed. A portion of the plane's tail was preserved and placed in a museum, a silent witness to the tragedy. The physical reminders stand in stark contrast to the myths that once dominated headlines. Over time, the truth slowly resurfaced, but damage had already been done. Fame, once a gift, had magnified tragedy into spectacle. Ricky's story became a lesson in how quickly narratives can distort reality, especially when a public figure dies suddenly and violently. Even after death, complications followed. Due to mishandling during transport, Ricky's remains were delayed, forcing his family to wait days before a funeral could be held. On January 6, 1986, mourners gathered in Los Angeles to say goodbye. Friends from television, music, and film attended, remembering the boy they watched grow up and the man who never stopped evolving. Ricky was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park beside his parents. Fans still visit his grave, leaving coins and small tokens of remembrance. The peaceful hillside stands in stark contrast to the violent way his life ended. Yet perhaps that quiet setting better reflects who Ricky truly was beneath fame. Ricky Nelson's influence reaches far beyond charts and television ratings. He pioneered the crossover between TV and music marketing, shaping modern pop culture. He inspired countless musicians and proved reinvention was possible, even when audiences resisted. Though fame faded, his dedication never did. He continued performing because music was his identity, not his escape. His children continue to honor his name, reminding the world of the truth. Ricky Nelson was not defined by rumors or tragedy, but by creativity, resilience, and quiet courage. Today, the preserved remains of the DC-3 tell a silent story of what happened and what might have been prevented. Ricky Nelson's final flight remains a haunting reminder of how fragile life can be, even for legends. His story forces us to ask difficult questions about truth, responsibility, and the stories we choose to believe. Was everything fully revealed, Or do unanswered questions still linger? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories behind the legends we thought we knew.